Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. One day, my world turned upside down because of an unexpected revelation from a close friend. Charles, a friend of mine for many years, called me at work. His voice trembled with tension as he described what he had seen. Barbara, my wife, was holding hands with another man. They were walking into a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. To prove it, he had taken several photos. At first, I couldn't believe it. There had to be a reasonable explanation for why she went to a motel with another man, especially during work hours when she was supposed to be at the office. I should clarify, my name is Thomas. Still shaken by Charles's call, I immediately asked him to send me the photos. When the images appeared on my phone, I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. There was no denying it. Barbara was in the photos. That evening, I tried to maintain my composure. I casually asked her how her day had been and whether she had gone out for lunch. To my surprise, she lied to my face. She calmly said she had eaten lunch at her desk. I raised an eyebrow and asked again, "Are you sure you didn't go out for lunch today?" Her reaction was immediate and defensive. "What are you trying to say, that I'm lying?" she snapped, without a trace of guilt. Although the photos and her lie didn't provide the full picture, it was more than enough to ignite my suspicions. Like many men in such situations, I decided to hire a private investigator. The detectives I approached were nothing like what I had imagined. Instead of meeting a gruff ex-cop in a smoky office, I found myself in a sleek, modern space run by two young, tech-savvy professionals. They were experts in finding information in the digital world that was inaccessible to regular people. Their services were expensive, but they assured me the results would be worth it. 10 days later, I returned to their office. They handed me a thick folder of undeniable evidence, photos, videos, and detailed reports. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Barbara was not seeing just one man, but two. One of them was Liam Byrne, a salesman from her work, with whom she had been having an affair for over 2 years. The other was Michael Miller, a mechanic she had started seeing a few months ago. The evidence was overwhelming, and I knew there was no avoiding the inevitable. My next step would be contacting a divorce lawyer. If this had been a one-time mistake, I might have found the strength to forgive her. But 2 years of infidelity? That was unbearable. The report even included transcripts of her conversations with Liam, showing that he wasn't the first man she had cheated on me with. Barbara felt perfectly comfortable living a double life. She enjoyed the stability and comfort I provided, but also found pleasure in her affairs with other men. While she had her own job, it was my business that gave us the comfortable lifestyle and paid for our children's college education. Meeting with the divorce lawyer was a sobering experience. I quickly realized that the legal system doesn't care about infidelity. Despite Barbara's actions, I would likely lose half of everything I had, and I might even have to sell my business to give her what she was entitled to. On top of that, I would probably have to pay monthly alimony, essentially financing her life while she continued her affairs. The only comfort was that our children were already grown and no longer lived with us. But the house? She would most likely get that too. I left the lawyer's office feeling more devastated and angry than ever before. The final blow came during a meeting with Margaret, my company's accountant. She came with great news. The business was thriving, and 3 new clients were about to raise its value to over $20 million. But as she enthusiastically explained the numbers, she stopped, noticing my indifference. "Thomas, I'm telling you that your hard work is finally paying off, and you look like you want to punch a wall," she said, confused. I took a deep breath and told her everything, about Barbara's infidelity, the grim outlook from the lawyer, and the possibility of losing everything, including the company. Margaret listened, expressing sympathy, and suggested postponing the meeting, understanding that I wasn't in the right state of mind to continue. She packed up her things and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The rest of the day passed in a fog, completely useless. Later in the afternoon, Margaret called again. "Thomas, can you stop by my office on your way home? I have an idea." At that moment, I was willing to do anything to delay going home and facing Barbara. Margaret led me into the office and closed the door with a sense of urgency. "First, I need to ask you a few questions," he said in a serious tone. "You've always told me that Barbara is hardly involved in your business, right?" I nodded, not quite sure where this was heading. "So she doesn't know that the company's value is about to skyrocket?" Margaret continued. "That's right," I replied. "I've never discussed business matters with her, and to be honest, we haven't been talking much at all lately." "Why do you need to know this?" I asked, feeling my curiosity growing. Margaret raised his hand to stop me. "Wait, I'll explain everything. But first, one last question. She doesn't suspect that you know about her affairs, does she?" "Exactly," I confirmed, shaking my head. "I haven't said a word to her, and I haven't confronted her about it." Margaret took a deep breath, his voice becoming firmer. "Here's the solution. You need to file for divorce, but don't rush into it. You remember what the lawyer said about how you'd be at a disadvantage if you divorce her, right?" "Yes," I answered. "He said I would lose a lot if everything went the usual way." "That's only if you go the traditional route with a straightforward divorce," Margaret explained. "But what if you could make her agree to your terms?" I frowned in confusion. "How do you suggest I do that? Are you implying I should blackmail her?" Margaret shook his head, dismissing the idea. "No, that won't work, especially when so much money is at stake. Blackmail won't be necessary. She'll agree to your terms herself, without even realizing what's happening. Have you ever heard of a tax divorce?" I looked puzzled. "No, what's that?" Leaning back in his chair, Margaret explained, "A few years ago, some couples would get divorced at the end of the year to lower their tax liabilities, especially if one spouse was earning significantly more. It became popular in December, and some couples saved enough money to afford lavish vacations before getting remarried. The government has since closed those loopholes, but I doubt Barbara knows anything about tax law." I thought about it. "I'm not sure, Margaret. She's mentioned several times that she doesn't really want a divorce. She just enjoys her little affairs while living off of me. She even hinted that she plans to quit her job so she can have more free time." Margaret smirked. "That's perfect. Her greed will play right into your hands. Tell her the business is growing, but with success comes higher taxes. Tell her you'll need to travel more, but she can quit her job and live the way she wants. She'll think it's a win-win situation. More freedom, more money." I raised an eyebrow. "And then what? Suggest a tax-free divorce as part of the plan, with the promise of a vacation to remarry afterward?" "Exactly," Margaret said with unwavering confidence. "We'll draft the paperwork on favorable terms. You'll keep control of the business, avoid paying alimony, and she'll be living in her fantasies. It's all perfectly legal." "Is it really legal?" I asked, still doubtful. "Absolutely," Margaret assured me. "I'll handle the paperwork. Your job is to keep everything a secret. If she gets suspicious, the plan will fall apart. You have to act like nothing has changed." The hardest part hit me at that moment. The real challenge would be controlling my emotions when I was already boiling with anger and resentment. It enraged me that she spent her Tuesdays and Thursdays with other men, lying to me about working late. The private investigators' reports were crystal clear. Tuesdays with a mechanic, Thursdays with a salesman. I managed to stay calm, suppressing my fury. A week later, Margaret had all the documents prepared. He gave me a detailed report outlining the financial benefits of this so-called tax plan, including transferring the house to Barbara's name. Luckily, the conversation was scheduled for a Wednesday, not one of her affair days. If she had just returned from seeing one of her lovers, I'm not sure I would have been able to keep my cool. That evening, when she walked in, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, 3 folders in front of me. "We need to talk," I said in a calm, confident voice. Her face immediately changed, revealing everything I needed to know. Barbara nervously glanced at the stack of folders on the table. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I picked up the top folder and opened it. "Yes, everything is under control." I continued, "Actually, it's great news, but I need to explain everything before you react. The business is doing really well, and we're ready to take a big step forward. You know, I've always made sure we were financially stable, but a significant portion of the profits has always gone back into the company. Now, we've reached a point where it will start bringing in substantial dividends. The only complication is how we're going to handle the tax deductions. Barbara's interest peaked at the mention of taxes. My accountant and I found a way to save about $100,000 in taxes, I said, watching her face light up. $100,000? That's amazing. But we're not doing anything illegal, right? She asked, worried. No, I reassured her. It's all perfectly legal. Many people do it. But before you get too excited, let me explain what it involves. Barbara's patience was wearing thin. All right, Thomas, stop dragging it out. What are you talking about? She demanded. I opened another folder and looked at her. It's called a tax divorce, I said, carefully observing her reaction. She gasped audibly. Wait, let me explain, I quickly added. It's a strategy some people use to avoid the spousal tax penalty. In our case, the new income would result in a huge penalty. Margaret, my accountant, told me that some of her clients file for divorce in December to avoid this, and then they use the saved money for a vacation and remarry in January. The only catch is that under the new rules, you have to stay divorced for at least 6 months, or it's considered fraud. Barbara looked stunned as she processed what she had just heard. It would only be a divorce on paper, I said, trying to calm her. Margaret mentioned that if we really want to maximize the benefit, we should stay divorced for a full year to get an even larger tax break in the second year. Of course, I'd have to work a bit more and travel occasionally, but the benefit for the business and for both of us would be significant. You might even be able to quit your job. I could see the thoughts spinning in Barbara's mind as she considered the potential benefits. What else would we need to do? She asked, her curiosity beginning to outweigh her doubts. Well, we would need to officially file for divorce, I explained, pulling out another folder. On paper, we'd split our assets. I would transfer the house into your name and divide the bank accounts. I'd also put the utilities in your name, but don't worry, I'll pay all the bills. In our day-to-day life, not much would change, but we'd be able to save a lot more money. She started to speak, but I quickly raised my hand to stop her. I know how important our marriage is to you. We don't have to do this if you're uncomfortable. We can always just pay the extra taxes. Barbara was on the verge of making a decision. After a while, she sighed. I don't like the idea of a divorce, even if it's just on paper. But if it saves us that much money, maybe it's worth it. I nodded, hiding my excitement. I don't want to rush you, but Margaret said we need to act quickly. We need to sign the papers and start the process so she can get everything set up. Take your time to read it all before signing. I'm leaving for a business trip this Friday and will be gone for the weekend. I knew this was the final push Barbara needed. She looked at the papers and nodded. You're right. This really does seem like the best option. I'll go through everything and sign it before you leave so Margaret can get started. As I expected, Barbara signed the documents before I left for my trip. She was exactly where I needed her to be. This was no typical business trip, though I used the time to gather evidence and find out if she had truly moved on to her new boyfriends. I discreetly installed cameras throughout the house to monitor her actions in my absence. As expected, and in line with her usual behavior, she was in my bed with one of them less than an hour after I left. The divorce unfolded exactly as I had predicted. The only real change in our day-to-day life was that we completely stopped being intimate. Barbara brought it up a few times, but I always blamed it on work stress and the financial strain of our new expenses. She didn't push further, likely because she was already getting what she wanted from her two lovers. I continued to watch her activities in our bedroom. It brought me no pleasure. I had long since become accustomed to her being with other men. What intrigued me most was whether she had caught on to my plan. A week after filing for divorce, the judge finalized the decision. However, there were stipulations on when changes could be made and under what circumstances. Margaret, my lawyer, reminded me that we needed to wait until the cooling-off period passed before anything became final. As that time drew closer, I realized I wanted to be rid of her completely. I met with Margaret to discuss our next move. Yes, I wanted to leave, but more than anything, I wanted her to suffer. I wanted to expose her affairs in the most humiliating way possible. "Thomas," Margaret said, "if you admit you knew about her cheating before the divorce, she could claim it was all a setup to protect your assets from her." "But she's the one who cheated," I countered. "She should be punished." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Are you willing to take that risk? The simplest thing to do is catch her with one of these guys in bed and leave. Take a few photos so she can't deny it." "So she just gets away with it?" I jumped out of my chair. Margaret shook her head. "I didn't say she gets away with it. She's already erased you from her life. You don't owe her alimony, and the best part, you're free from her." That wasn't enough for me. There has to be a way to ruin her without jeopardizing the divorce. Margaret stopped me by raising her hand. "Wait, you've got plenty of recordings of her with these men after the divorce, right?" I nodded. "Use that. Claim you weren't planning on getting remarried. Cut off her access to the house's communication systems and finances. Then tell her lovers and their families everything. Watch how it all falls apart." "I can say I only found out about the affairs after the divorce," I said, warming up to the idea. "That way I can destroy her while staying within the law." "Exactly," Margaret confirmed. "Now is the perfect time. With your new contracts, you're about to become very wealthy. Let's find you a new place to live and she can deal with the fallout. In a month, you can deliver the final blow." Margaret paused for a moment, considering. "You'll also need to think about how to handle the kids. That won't be easy. But I think when they find out what she's done, they'll side with you. She always lectured them about honesty and fidelity." I smirked at the thought. Barbara had put on quite the show when our daughter went to a concert with another guy while in a relationship. She had said, "Dishonesty will destroy any relationship." Margaret smiled at the hypocrisy. "Yes, it's pretty incredible." "I'm sure my daughter will hate her once she knows the truth," I said. Margaret met my eyes. "Thomas, remember, you don't need to do anything drastic to cut Barbara off. The divorce is done. You're no longer married to her, and you don't have to pay for a house that doesn't belong to you. Just let it go." With that, I left my meeting with Margaret, ready to move on and finish this chapter of my life. I had already found a new apartment and was more than prepared for the changes. In 7 days, I would be fully ready to leave my old life and my former home behind. It was extremely important for me to see both of my children before everything fell apart. They were busy with summer courses on their campuses. My son, Oscar, immediately took my side. He was furious about what his mother had done but promised not to confront her until I had left the house. My daughter, Samantha, however, was not so easily convinced. Samantha found it hard to believe that her mother was capable of such betrayal. She couldn't reconcile her mother's actions with the lessons she had been taught about trust and loyalty. It pained me to do it, but I was ready. I showed Samantha irrefutable evidence of her mother's affair. The disbelief in her eyes quickly turned to anger when she saw the proof. Samantha wanted to confront her mother right away, but I had to convince her to wait until I had moved out. When I returned to town, everything fell into place perfectly. The second contract I had been waiting for was signed, and I signed the lease for a new apartment. The furniture was scheduled to arrive in 3 days. In 2 days, I would begin executing my plan. The first step was to move out. While Barbara was at work, I quietly left the house. With a rented truck and a few friends, I took only the essentials: tools, clothes, and personal items, no furniture. I also removed the hidden cameras I had installed throughout the house. Barbara had become so accustomed to my absence that she didn't even notice I'd been gone for several days. But the next phase of my plan would definitely get her attention. I anonymously sent emails to the wives of her 2 lovers, attaching videos that exposed their infidelity. I felt a slight pang of guilt, knowing what kind of storm was about to hit those families. But I reminded myself that I didn't start this. I was simply bringing everything to a just conclusion. About 20 minutes after I sent the emails, Barbara left me a voicemail asking me to call her back. She still thought I was out of town. By the evening, her calls became more urgent. Eventually, she realized my things were gone. I continued to ignore her increasingly frantic calls and messages. Both of my children told me she had called them, sounding desperate, asking if they had spoken to me. They covered for me, claiming they hadn't heard from me in a while. They tried to find out from her why she was so desperate to reach me, but she refused to explain what was causing her sudden anxiety. She didn't even explain what had triggered her unexpected distress. I let her stew in confusion for 3 more days without saying a word. By Thursday, I knew she'd be home alone, the perfect moment to talk to her after I'd struck her lovers. "Thomas, why are you knocking on your own house's door? Where have you been?" she asked in surprise as I stood at the door. "This is no longer my house, Barbara. After the divorce, it's entirely yours. May I come in?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, come in. But what are you talking about? We need to decide when we're getting remarried. I'm tired of this whole fake divorce story," she said, trying to regain control of the situation. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. The divorce isn't fake. It's as real as it gets, and you took full advantage of it," I said, watching as worry flashed in her eyes, though she tried to maintain an air of confidence. "What do you mean? I told you I was done with the games and ready to renew our vows," she retorted sharply. I couldn't hold back my laughter. "Oh, come on, stop pretending," I said. She stared at me. "Where are your things?" she asked irritably. "You noticed? I moved out," I replied casually. "I couldn't sleep in the same bed where you had your affairs." She sighed heavily. "Let's just end this game, as you said." I fully realized that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you meet with 2 different men, and this doesn't change even when I'm not around. Legally, we're not married, so I suppose technically you're not cheating. But your actions have led me to a decision. I will not be renewing our vows. You yourself destroyed 25 years of marriage. It's better for both of us to stay divorced, and that's why I left. Barbara's face quickly shifted from shock to rage. "What are you saying? No, that's not how it's going to be. We're still married, and the divorce was just a formality for taxes." She threatened legal action, insisting, "We're married, damn it! You can't just walk away." I stood my ground. "Actually, I can. It's completely legal. You signed the papers in front of the judge." She tried to argue. "One could claim you were deceived, but that's fraud, and I won't support you if you go down that path. It's a serious crime." Her anger intensified. "This is absurd. I know what you're up to. You found out about Liam and orchestrated this fake divorce to cut me out of your business." I shook my head in confusion. "Wait, what? Are you seriously telling me you were having an affair with Liam while we were still married?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she countered, "Who are you to talk? You told their wives behind my back, didn't you? You destroyed 2 families with your sneaky letters. Now both men have been kicked out of their homes and are caught up in nasty divorces thanks to you." I was stunned. "2 men? You've been with 2 this whole time?" Barbara tried to avoid answering. "What difference does it make? The divorce is legal, and you can throw as much money at it as you want, but it won't change anything. Maybe you should focus on explaining this to our children. I'm sure they won't be proud of their mother." Her rage grew. "You told them, didn't you? How could you involve our kids in this?" I remained calm. "Honestly, I should have told them a long time ago why we weren't renewing our vows." She wasn't giving up. "Stop playing games. We're still married, and that's how it's going to stay. Liam and Michael? They're in the past. They mean nothing. I love you. Yes, I made mistakes, but I want to fix them and be the wife you deserve." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm glad you finally realized the damage you've done, but I think this lesson is one you'll need for your next husband, not me." Before leaving, I added, "By the way, I haven't told your parents yet. I'll leave that to you, unless you want me to do it myself." Her face turned pale. "My mom, it'll kill her." I nodded. She was already in shock when she found out, and I had to show her some proof, though I spared her the worst details to convince her. Barbara's desperation was obvious as she pleaded, "Please give me one more chance. I'll make it right. I'll be better." But my decision was final. As I walked away, her pleas turned into curses, with tears streaming down her face. She didn't stop there. She fought to annul the divorce, filing multiple lawsuits demanding the terms be changed. I couldn't help but find it absurd as she stood in court, openly admitting to her affairs with 2 men even before we separated. She claimed I manipulated the divorce for tax purposes to cut her out of my business. All the while, our children and her parents sat in the courtroom watching her lose control. As expected, the judge ruled against her, giving her a stern reprimand for her lack of accountability. After the hearing, my parents approached her, outraged by her betrayal. And then, in a moment no one expected, her mother delivered the final blow, a punch right to Barbara's face. Barbara turned to our children, Samantha and Oscar, for support, but they turned away from her, unable to reconcile with what she had become. In the end, neither of them wanted anything more to do with her. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.